there, folks. Welcome to the Hot Zone. I'm Chuck Holton. Thanks for watching. Is it Friday already? Holy cow. Time flies when you're having fun. I'm in West Virginia, Morgantown. Today, we are here visiting my newborn grandson, first grandson, and man, is that cool. That's a great feeling. I never thought being a grandpa would be so awesome, and it is. It's really something. Hard to even explain. But there's a lot going on, and it's about time for me to start getting back to work. I've been off, kind of on vacation for the last month or so, and it's about time for me to get back to it. There is a lot going on in Panama. I'm going to leave for Panama here in a couple days and go down and do a little reporting on that while I try to see if my house is still standing. I have been traveling so much this year that I've literally only spent about 15 days in my own bed in Panama at my home there all year. So that's not cool. Little too much time away. Obviously, my family's been with me for a lot of that time, but still, it'd be nice to go sleep in my own bed. And it looks like because of the unrest that's happening in Panama right now, that I could actually do my job and not leave home, which would be a first. And so that'll be cool. You know, one of the things about being a war correspondent is that you always have job security, because there's always going to be another crisis. And I've learned not to get too wrapped around the axle if I have to miss a crisis or two because I'm taking some time with family, because there will always be another one that comes up. So right now, what's going on in Panama, if you haven't been following the news, there's been a lot of protests there, as there have been in countries around the world, because of the high cost of everything. That really, a lot of it comes down to the high cost of fuel, which increases the cost of lots of goods. Panamanians are really upset because gas got over $5 a gallon at one point, and they got to the point where they couldn't buy food. Food was just too expensive. And so what they did was went out and protested in the streets. This is led by some what I would call unsavory elements, some Marxist elements in the country. Suntrax is one group that is heavily influenced by Marxism. There's a couple of other groups, labor unions and things like that, that are sort of ginning up this response to the high prices by getting people mad enough to get out in the streets and actually block roads. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this tactic. We're seeing it around the world now, that people use when they get mad about things they want to protest. Instead of just going down to the town square and protesting, or going and protesting in front of the government building or something like that, people are deciding to protest in the middle of the street in an attempt to block traffic. Now, I have to say it's a very effective way to protest. And they call it nonviolent because they're not burning things necessarily, they're not attacking people, they're not destroying property. But I disagree. I think it is a form of violence, just like it would be if I decided to kidnap my neighbor and hold him hostage with a gun to his head until the mayor of my town refunded all my property taxes for the last 10 years. You know, if I was mad about having to pay property taxes, I could go down and I could hold a sign in front of the mayor's office, and that probably wouldn't get me anywhere. I could attack the mayor himself, that'd get me arrested. And so what if I just went next door and kidnapped my neighbor and tied him to a chair and held a gun to his head and said, I'm gonna hold the gun to this guy's head until I get some relief from the mayor. First of all, it's not the neighbor's fault. What does the neighbor have to do with it? Why do I have to bring him into it? Why am I punishing my neighbor for something that the mayor did to me? But obviously it would get the mayor's attention in a way that would be much more effective than if I just stood in front of his office holding a sign. But it is a form of violence. Even if I don't shoot my neighbor, I am holding him hostage, and I'm against his will punishing him for something that's not his fault. And that's exactly what these protests do. They are effective because they magnify the misery that is felt in the country. So you have this group of people who want to protest, Suntrax, Sinapro, these labor unions, whatever. They decide they're going to protest, but instead of going down and protesting in front of the government buildings, they go protest in the street, which essentially holds the entire country hostage and punishes the entire country, makes the entire country miserable. And that misery then is, the aggregate amount of misery is elevated to a point that the government cannot ignore it. So it is very effective. And it's probably a better option than picking up a gun and going down and starting shooting. And it's certainly a better option than trying to burn down the whole city, which Black Lives Matter has done, and some of those other organizations like Antifa. But in the final analysis, it is violence. It is a violent way of protesting. And it is, I think, morally reprehensible. Now, if it's the only possible way of getting the government's attention, people, I guess, have decided that that's what they have to do. But in my opinion, it's not, you cannot call it a moral good if you're punishing somebody who's not at fault, if you're holding them hostage, if you're destroying their livelihood because they can't get to work, if you're causing babies to be born on the side of the street because they can't get to the hospital, if people could easily literally die because they can't get the medical care that they need. And what was once expensive that caused you to go out and protest to begin with is now not expensive, it's just not available because there is no food, there is no fuel in the city now because everything's been bought and nothing, it can't be replenished. They're not letting any traffic in. Then no trucks can come in. So the government is forced to do something about it. They're forced to go out and they tried talking to the protesters. They tried making a deal with the protesters. They decided to subsidize the price of fuel in Panama to $3.25 or $3.30 a gallon. That didn't make them happy enough. In reality, a lot of the things that the labor unions and Suntrax are demanding are really things that the government cannot deliver. They want the government to just arbitrarily lower the prices on things, but the price is a function of supply and demand and the price of oil. So the government of Panama is not able to manipulate the price of oil. They can subsidize the purchase of oil in their own country. And Panama is one country that actually has some funds with which they could do that because they get funds from the Panama Canal and a couple other enterprises that comes right into the government coffers. So other than tax dollars, Panama does actually have some money that it can use for things like that. But most of that money is already going out to pay for the social welfare system, the social health system in Panama, and other things like that. So it's not like the government, like every government, whatever they bring in, they spend at least that much and maybe more. So it's not like they have a big slush fund that they can put to use, especially after 2 years of the COVID crisis. Now, the government finally got to the point after like 18 days of protests that it decided we have got to do something to get some food and fuel into the city because the city was running out of everything and people were literally starting to go hungry. So the government sent out thousands of police to break up the protests and clear the roads and let traffic through. That caused some clashes between the police and the protesters, some actual violence with rock throwing and rubber bullets and tear gas and, the standard things. That made people mad enough that in some places they started going out and looting and burning, destroying police cars and things like that. This is really unprecedented. This is something that you don't see in Panama. Panama is a very pacifistic culture. They're a very passive culture. They don't, in many ways they're lazy. And I'm not trying to be mean here. I'm just trying to tell you the truth. Panamanian culture throughout its history has been known as sort of a mediocre, lazy culture. They're not really big on ambition and excellence. And, they have a good reason not to be, because they live in a very idyllic paradise where food grows on trees. You don't have to go out and kill yourself to try to make a living in Panama. You can make a living, and you can, when food just grows on trees, you don't have to do a whole lot. And so people don't. And I don't fault them for that necessarily, because in reality, a lot of people in the United States work their fingers to the bone for their entire lives to try to get just some small part of what Panamanians are born with, that ease of survival, that not having to worry about anything. So Panamanians are a pretty chill culture, and I like that a lot. They're not a real warlike people. So if it's bad enough that they're going out into the streets and protesting, then it is pretty bad. And so again, I don't blame them per se, but I do think that it's sort of unethical in the way that they're protesting. If you want to get the government's attention, then go surround the government buildings and lock the government in their buildings. Don't let them leave, and have your conflict with the government. Don't have it with the rest of the, it's sort of self-defeating in a way to lock down the whole country. Now that's my opinion, but again, as I've said, what they are doing is being effective. And so, ethical or not, they're having an effect. And I'm hoping that the government will decide to take drastic steps to get things kind of back on the rails. I'm not sure what exactly they can do, though, to get things back on the rails, other than the president step down and just call new elections or something, because right now people are so angry, and they're so angry at the politicians. Now, it's not just because of the high price of things. People are also angry because of the perceived corruption, and I say perceived, it's actual corruption. There's definitely corruption in any government. In this case, the corruption comes down to people are mad because the government officials, like in the what would be the Congress of Panama, are, by and large, they are able to hire a lot of people, and most of the people they hired don't do anything. They just hire their friends and relatives and pay them exorbitant salaries, and they stay home and they don't work. They don't come to work. They don't do anything. And they're called bottles, botellas. And that's a big problem. That would be one thing that the government could do, is they really, if they just fired all these people that are considered botellas and said, look, we've got to revamp the system. You can't hire these people that do nothing anymore. If they figure out a way to do that, that might actually make a difference. But these people, one of the things that we see in our government in the United States and in the Panamanian government and in most other governments is that they're very, very unwilling to prosecute their own, to police their own, to actually take steps to reduce their own power and authority and give themselves a reduction in pay rather than an increase in pay. I guess during COVID, the Panamanian politicians doubled their own pay. That's not a good look. So I'm going to go back there and do some reporting on this. We also will see whether or not I can do some reporting on the migrant crisis down there, because apparently they have record numbers of migrants coming through the Darien Gap with nowhere to go now because the roads are all shut down. So the camps in the Darien are overflowing with thousands of migrants. They're wandering around town. They're walking down the streets. They're not being kept in the camps anymore. And the government is in big trouble with all that. They're going to It's obviously a huge drain on the government to have all these illegal migrants coming through the Darien Gap. So stay tuned. I'll have some of that for you here coming up pretty soon. Thanks for watching. You can go to chuckholton.locals.com and follow us there. We'll see you later.